This A-frame trellis has been what I have planted my pole beans under for 6 or 7 years, and I absolutely love it. So I thought I would share with you my method of planting those pole beans that end up giving me green beans enough to last all season. The first thing I do when I get ready to plant my beans in a year is to test the soil temperature. Ideally, I want a soil temperature above 65 to be able to have those seeds germinate as well as possible. Now, a few days ahead of my planting, I typically rake back any mulch that was already on the garden, and I had already done that at this point, and you can see me now. I'm actually just kind of loosening the soil a little bit ahead of planting the seeds. I don't till my garden, but I still want to have a loose top layer in order to be able to plant the seeds in. Once I loosen that soil, I take the other side of my Rogue scuffle hoe and I'll create a little indentation area so that I can place the seeds in later. I love this particular tool. On one side, you can move things around and weed, and on the other side, you can have that easy furrow for planting seeds. So it works out really, really well. I do this on both sides of the A-frame trellis, both the outside and the inside. I'm planting my beans on both sides. I've done it this way for 7 seasons about, and it works out really well, and I have a huge harvest doing it that way. In some seasons, I plant below the A-frame trellis other crops like you can see here. When I do plant underneath my A-frame trellis, I like to plant cooler season crops because as the beans grow, those beans will provide shade, and in my Arkansas climate, that shade is very helpful for keeping the soil cooler and also just to help those cooler season crops. That's why I chose carrots this year, but you can also choose other crops like lettuce or greens. I can't promise they still won't bolt at some point, but it at least buys them a little bit of time. The next thing that I do is I will take the lines that the beans are going to crawl up over the season, and I'll make sure that they're spaced apart the direction that they should be spaced. If this is your first time doing an A-frame trellis, you will have to create those lines. I like to use baling twine. You can see that that baling twine has actually been reused for ever since we've started, so maybe 6 or 7 years. Either at the end of the season or at the beginning of the next season, I will take these spent bean vines and I'll strip them off of the baling twine. And this is the first year I've actually had any of them break. But like I said, I think it's been 6 or 7 years we've used them. But still, through the course of the season, sometimes those lines get where they're not quite at the right position. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm making sure that I have those baling twine lines separated and spaced out so that the beans can climb those throughout the season. Next comes the actual planting of the seeds. I've started to soak my seeds for a couple of hours before planting just to get them the jump start that they need. I haven't always done that, but I have noticed that they do seem to sprout a little bit faster when I do. And I also like to time my planting where I know we will get some kind of a rain in the next few days, and that always seems to hasten germination as well. As far as plant spacing, I tend to plant my pole beans close together because they end up not needing that much space between them since they're growing up. I tend to eyeball it, but I would say I space my seeds about 3 to 6 inches apart. And by doing that, I don't really have to go back and thin them because they're not too close together, and it ends up working out well. And then if I do have any issues with germination, that's still a good amount where hopefully I won't have to go back in and replant. After I have all the bean seeds in place, I will go back and take my Rogue scuffle hoe and sometimes just the heel of my boot, and I'll move back the soil over the seeds. And to me, that's just the easiest way to do it. I don't get too picky with it because they'll germinate their beans as long as they're not too deep, which about an inch is about as deep as I'll plant them. Then they tend to work out fine. And I will pat them down with my feet, my boots, just to make sure that they're compacted enough to be able to get that soil contact. But I'll do that, like I said, with my rogue hoe or with my boots, just to make sure that those seeds are well covered. And that's it. That's my process for planting pole beans around my 2 A-frame trellises. I'm able to get enough green beans to can and last our family all year with this method. And I hope that maybe you will be inspired to build your own A-frame trellis and grow enough beans to last you all year as well.